I'm glad you came back to hear about learning versus getting an answer. Here's what I mean, and here's the context before I get started on what I mean. I get a lot of people who understandably are very invested in their own case, and they go out and try to do a lot of research. In fact, do a lot of research. Um, Now, for those people whose research starts with the words "Hey Siri" or "Alexa," you didn't do research. And I'll get into that later. But they go out and they do work, and they find things they think apply to their case. They're trying to help me. They want me to do a better job for them. I'm fine with that. I'm great with constructive criticism. They come to me, they give it to me. Now, it's the people who think they have all the answers when they come to me and tell me what I'm supposed to know about how to help them. Um, I wouldn't do that to someone I was going and asking advice from. I'd give them feedback. I'd give them all the information I could. I would tell them what I had found online or in books or wherever. Then I'd listen to what they have to say. I would hope um, they wouldn't say it until after they took the information I gave them, compared it to what they know, and then came back and gave me a full answer. But this all boils down to, I've been realizing more recently, um, people who just get an answer versus go out and learn an answer. And here's what that means. If you go out and just look something up, says it in a book, says it online, I read it in an article, my neighbor told me, and he'd been through this before, that's getting an answer. You ask a virtual assistant, or you ask some pseudo expert or somebody who knows a little bit more than you, and they just give you an answer. Okay, well, that's fine, and maybe that's right. Do you know if it's right? How do you know if it's right? Well, if you don't know how to answer the question, how do I know if that's right? Then you have to really think about learning things instead of finding things out. We don't just learn in school. In fact, a lot of people learn most of what they know out of school. Even people who are in school now are learning more during their day out of school than they are during their day in school. Now, they may be learning a lot more specific technical knowledge in school, but they're learning about life out of school. What does learning mean? Learning means observing. It means paying attention. It means asking those questions. And then it means thinking about it, applying it, asking if it makes sense. And yes, doing some research, going and looking things up. In fact, I'd tell you, I listened to a report that came out of the Huberman Lab, the Huberman Lab. That's a neuroscientist out at Stanford University who has a very interesting podcast. And there was actually a brain study that showed people who go through the process of learning the same facts that people go through the process of getting develop a larger and stronger neural pathway leading to that information, that answer, than the people who just went out and got it. And that experiment was people who were given books and resources that were not online or minimal online versus people who were just told, hey, you can Google this. And the people who Googled it didn't go through the process of learning what they were trying to find the answer to. And our brain develops a neural pathway to match that learning. You don't do that in 5 or 10 seconds. You don't do that by reading one paragraph. You do that by getting what you think is the answer, going out and testing that answer, reading the other opposing viewpoints that say the answer is something else, and then deciding what the real best answer is, or just deciding, well, you know what? Nobody has the answer to this question. Most people think this, other people think that. And then come on down to my office after you've done that kind of learning about your case. Or better yet, let's learn about it together. Most of my clients know more about the facts than I do. They were there, I wasn't. I know more about the law. That's what I've been doing. Not only do I have technical school, I've been applying it for years now, a couple decades. So I've got that learning experience. The people I'm talking to know the other people involved. They know the area where they were. They know way more about what happened than I do. And so I can learn from them too. It's when I try to tell them what the facts are, or when they try to tell me what the law is, that neither of us are learning. And that defeats the purpose. Two heads are better than one, but everybody in the room needs to be learning. And you need to understand how valuable the process of learning versus getting answers is. Now, getting answers can be valuable sometimes. Sometimes that's all you need. How do I get to the store? I don't need to learn that. I just want to tell me how to get there. I got to get there. I need some milk. That's fine. Sometimes just getting the answer gets it done. But the important things in your life, the important things you participate in or that impact you or the people you care about, that's when you need to know how to learn. Because it is really high risk to go out and just get an answer and not be able to tell whether that answer is correct or not if you plan to act on that answer. If you are going to invest in that answer and invest your future and the impact on your life in that answer, you need to think about learning how reliable that answer is. Best way to do that, go out and do some looking on your own, reading, comparing, talking, and then go to somebody who knows a lot about the field that you're learning in and say, hey, here's what I know. What can you add to that? How can you make my answer better? So that's what I have to say about learning versus getting. In the overall scheme of life, learning is going to develop stronger neural pathways. That's a great thing. And it applies outside what I do in criminal defense. It certainly applies in criminal defense. I need to learn about the case, the facts of the case. The people I'm representing need to learn about the law of the case so we come to an understanding of what can happen. But that is only one area of life. I need to learn about a whole lot more. And you guys can probably teach me about what you know about. And we all need to be learning about things because we need to know if the answers we're getting to the questions that we think are important to ask are reliable answers. Because if we're going to act on those answers and we don't know how reliable they are, we are just gambling with life. And that is not a good idea, ladies and gentlemen. Learn to learn. You don't need to go to school for it. You can learn outside of a high school. You can learn outside of a university. I have a grandparent who dropped out of school in the 8th grade, was fabulously successful in life. He worked hard. He paid attention to what was going on around him, and over the course of his life, he learned so much that I am still saying, I hope I learned as much as my papa did. So look at everybody around you as an opportunity to learn and present yourself to others as their opportunity to learn. Because if we learn how to learn, we can test our answers, we can only act on the best, most reliable answers, and ladies and gentlemen, we will all have better lives for it. Have a great day.